Hey guys, it's Emily and today I'm doing a first impression review and demo of the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture palette that was just released. Subculture has been marketed as the sister palette to the insanely popular Modern Renaissance, which is so exciting because now we're getting this plethora of cool tones, bright and unique shades to complement the warms of the Modern Renaissance. There's a nice mix of complementary colours, blue and orange, green and red, purple and yellow, as well as neutrals and specialty finishes. There are 11 matte shades in this palette, including all those bright, unusual shades you really don't tend to see in the matte formula. 1 metallic, a nice bronzy gold, and 2 duochromes. They don't look that exciting in the pan, but just wait. Okay, time to swatch. I'm swatching all these shadows with my finger onto a completely clean arm, no primers or anything special. As you can see, that first shade Cube swatches kind of like nothing on its own, but the other shades are super pigmented. And the second row, again electric, the other duochrome isn't show-stopping here, but I did want to show you what happens when you layer these duochromes over top of a dark base, which you'll see in just a second. I'm just using a creamy black kohl liner from Inglot as my base here, and you can see that as soon as I pat these duochromes on, they completely transform. I used both of these shades in my demo today, and although they did work the way I wanted them to without the dark base, they're definitely designed to be a topper over, a black or something dark to show off their true colour shifting potential. Okay, so I'm using 2 different eyeshadow primers today. On my left eye, a MAC Paint Pot, something a bit more heavy duty and I know is really popular with a lot of people. I'm using the shade Soft Ochre. And on my right eye, I'm using my everyday favourite, which is the Inglot Eyeshadow Keeper. I just wanted to see if there was a concernible difference between these, but there wasn't. Okay, I'm going in with Dawn all over my lid and into my crease. I had initially intended to use this as an all-over colour up to my brow bone, but it was a bit too dark. There are a few shades in this palette that I feel like look a little bit lighter in the pan, not in a way that they oxidize once they're on the eye, which I know is a complaint that I've seen around and a lot of people have, but more just they apply a little bit darker than you expect them to. Okay, now I'm taking New Wave on a fluffy pencil brush and bringing it into my crease. This was my very first time playing with these shadows, and I think there's definitely a right and a wrong way to use them. Because of the amount of actual pigment ingredients in these shades, they're not quite as silky smooth to blend out like the Modern Renaissance. You definitely want to go slow and build up colour in areas that you want to be nice and diffused. I'm using a flat brush to pack edge onto my lid. I wanted this yellow to be nice and bright and strong, so I patted the colour on, not building up quite as slowly as I had previously, because I don't need to blend it out as much, only along those edges. Okay, here is where I started to get a little bit adventurous. I wanted a pop of light just in the very centre of my lid, and I tried to see if Cube would just layer over the top of my other colours. This obviously didn't work. I tried spraying my loaded brush with a setting spray. This also did not work. And then I thought maybe because my lid was now a little bit damp that I could just pat the colour on with my finger, but still a no. I ended up using my Too Faced glitter glue in the area I wanted Cube and patting the shadow on top of it. So if you're going to use these duochromes not on a black base like I showed you earlier, and you want them to really stand out, you definitely need to use some kind of sticky base. I'm just going to blend everything together, going back and forth between cube, edge, and a clean fluffy brush until everything transitions nicely. For my lower lash line, I wanted to do something dramatic to contrast from my lid. I really wanted to use that beautiful teal colour access, but knowing how powdery and pigmented those shades are, I wanted to put down some more of my glitter glue just so my colour had something to really adhere to. I'm using a really small brush here to place access on the lash line, and I've only really patted the tip of the brush into the pan, a little went a really long way, and then after that I'm going in with a small, clean, fluffy brush to start blending out. Now I wanted my two different colour families to melt together, but I didn't want to take that blue straight up into the crease. As I mentioned before, this palette is full of complementary colours, and although they can look amazing when they're next to each other, if you mix complementary colours like blue and orange, as I've done in this look, things can become muddy and grey and gross. To try and combat this, I'm taking this more green shade, Untamed, just to meld the upper and lower lash lines together and to blend them out nicely. After this, I'm going back in with just a tiny bit of Dawn to perfect my edges. I'm going in now and making sure I'm happy with my teal, because I'm going to add a little pop of a different colour on the centre of my lower lash line, sort of mimicking what we created on the lid. I'm dabbing some more glitter glue just in the centre and then following that with a second duochrome shade, Electric. I decided I wanted that green to come up just a tad higher in my crease, and then I'm giving the whole look one final go over with a blending brush. I'm taking Cube and using it to highlight my brow bone and inner corner. You can't see it very well here, but I did end up going back a few times, patting on a few layers onto my inner corner especially, and it really gives a different and interesting look for your highlights. I'm applying black eyeliner to my waterline and tightline. And now some mascara and false eyelashes. The colour I had on my lips just didn't look right with this eye makeup. I felt like I needed something bold enough to stand up to these colours, but that wouldn't clash or overshadow them, so I decided to go with a black. As a final touch, because I'm obsessed with this shade, I'm patting Cube onto the centre of my lips. And this is the final look. I'm happy with the way it turned out, and I'm excited to see what else I can do with this palette now that I've had a bit of experience with this formula, which is kind of different than your typical eyeshadow. Okay, so overall thoughts and review of this palette. The outside is that same velvety velour material as the Modern Renaissance, which is beautiful, but it gets grubby so easily. You can see already there's marks on the front of mine from eyeshadows. I don't mind it too much myself. I know a lot of people do. At least this one is a bit darker than the Modern Renaissance, so hopefully it'll hold up a little bit better, because as you can see, my Modern Renaissance is very gross. The only other issue I ended up having was actually a loose pan. The shade Fudge doesn't sit flat in my palette. It came that way, it wiggles around a bit. It doesn't affect the use of the shadow, but I can see that over time it might completely loosen and fall out. There's been a lot of controversy going around in the last week about formula and pressing of these shadows and whether there were problems with different batches and whatnot. The most common complaints I've seen are that the shadows are excessively powdery with heaps of kickback to the point where you can hit pan in a matter of seconds. As you can see here on my palette, there's a lot of kickback. This is in half speed because it was a short clip, but it's not to the degree that we're seeing from some others. I did the same test in my Modern Renaissance. The results are pretty much identical. I do think Subculture is a more powdery formula, but I also understand that that might have been what was necessary to create these shades. To get this level of pigmentation, you really do end up with a powdery, less smooth to blend product. Stephanie Nicole did a really great video on this palette and went really in depth about this idea if you're interested. She also does brush swatches and cost breakdown, so if you're looking for a more in-depth analysis type review, I'll link her video below. The second huge issue that a lot of others have had is the product almost picking itself up off the eye, creating weird patchiness. I did a little arm swatch. I didn't notice this issue on my eye, but I wanted to give it a go anyway, and I ended up not having any problems. Although the product is definitely sitting more where I initially placed it. This is the case for most eyeshadows, you know, the colour is the most intense where you first place your brush down, but with this palette, I feel like it's really something you have to keep in mind. If you use it knowing the way this formula works, then it's going to be a great product. I found myself treating some of these shades almost like a pressed pigment. You've got to use care because of how high the concentration of colour pigment is. I do think that some people received faulty palettes based on some videos that I've seen, but if there were batch issues, I seem to have lucked out and bought one with none of those problems. All in all, I really like this palette. It's not perfect, but unless you ended up with a faulty palette, once you play and you get to know the way these shadows work, it's a really cool product. I do know that ANASTASIA is also accepting returns if you did end up with a palette that isn't working the way it's supposed to. I just find the colour selection so inspiring and it makes me want to create so many fun, abstract looks. I feel like this palette is really filling a gap in the market. We haven't seen anything like this for a really long time and I really, really love it. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching my first impressions review of the ANASTASIA Subculture palette. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you haven't already purchased it, hopefully got a bit of info that might help you decide. Let me know if you'd like to see more looks using this palette, and don't forget to subscribe and follow me on my social media to stay updated. Bye!